This is John Mullen. The courses are ie411 and ie561. This course is being taught in the classroom, but also being recorded for the students that are not on campus. Okay. ie411 is an undergraduate course. ie561 is graduate. The topics are slightly different, but the lectures are the same. The differences are going to be in the assignments. In particular, the 561 students will be doing a project, and the 411 students will be looking at the projects. They'll get a break because they have all those other finals to take. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to introduction to the topic and to the course, and an overview of what we're going to do this semester. This lecture describes the need for safety awareness in the workplace and the role engineers play in assuring that safety. It also presents an overview of the course, available resources, and course policies. So we're going to have an introduction, of course, the purpose of the course, an overview of the course, nuts and bolts, and at the back I'll have some references, and these are the references which I use for this lecture. Okay? So let's start with an introduction. That's me. That's also me down in the blue box there. There's a phone number, fax number. Not many people use fax anymore, but if you need it, it's there. There's my regular email. I prefer you use email through the course management system, which at this time is Blackboard. But if you guys are viewing, if someone's viewing this tape or this recording at a later date, it'll be something else. But right now, it's Blackboard. And you can see the syllabus for office hours. And I may or may not have a teaching assistant for 411. We'll just have to see how it goes. So for the objectives, there's three components that you need to develop for safety management. One, of course, is knowledge. Lots of that, but you guys are all engineers, so you already know a lot of stuff, so that's good. Awareness, knowing something and being aware of something are two different things. So you have to develop a sense of awareness, and safety awareness is quite different from the kind of awareness engineers usually develop. And we'll get more into that. And of course, skill, which is the ability to do things, and that only comes from practice. We're going to talk about laws, the laws of physics and the laws of the court system. They both play a role. We're going to talk about hazards, a more formal definition than you might be used to, and then tools that we can use to do all of this stuff, or to help us do all of this stuff. So let me start off with a little bit of safety in the news. Some of the stories are old, some of them are not. U.S. emergency rooms treated 3.5 million motor vehicle crash victims in 2006. I tried to find a later figure, and I couldn't. This I got from Medline Plus News, January 15, 2010. This and the other references I have in a slide at the end. So if you want to check these out and look for other things, Medline's a pretty large site. It has all kinds of medical care associated information and stories. Okay. Scientists warn that sitting too much could be deadly even if you exercise. Apparently, if you sit more than 2 hours, this lecture is only 1 hour and 15 minutes. If you sit more than 2 hours, strange things happen to your body, even if you exercise a lot. So the research indicates that you should get up and walk around. Not right now, okay? And that's from the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. OSHA fines 2 contractors $175,000 following construction collapse that injured 8 workers, and that's from the U.S. Department of Labor. We'll go to that site for more information in a little bit. Now, emergency rooms, that's general safety. Sitting too much, that could be work-related. In what way?
You have to go to work, sit on your desk for 8 hours.
Right, and several years ago, I had a student team in a different course working in a factory, actually arranged a work center so people would get up and move from workstation to workstation. And they found that it actually worked faster that way. And now this recent research says, hey, it's even healthier. We didn't know that at the time. But a lot of jobs involve sitting around. 100 years ago, you know what people did? They stood around. People had stools. They didn't have chairs. Chairs is kind of a new thing. Well, anytime you have something new, you may have a problem. So this could definitely be work-related. And then we have OSHA. What's OSHA? I don't know. It's pretty close. The Occupational Safety and Health, not hazard, Administration. Okay, we're going to have a whole lecture on that later. But they're a big government agency that watches what people do on the job, and if an employer persists in having an unsafe condition, they come after them and give them fines and stuff like that. So that's from 2009. More stuff. Sony recalls 35,000 laptop batteries. This was in 2008. I thought this was kind of interesting because one of the batteries was actually in a computer I was using at the time. They recalled my battery. I had to send it back to the factory and get a different one because apparently what happened is they would overcharge too much and heat up, and then your computer would burst into flames and anything that's near it. I hope they got that fixed. Okay. Trouble is, you don't hear about these things until after a few people burn up. Explosion prompts battery plant to bring in safety consultants. There's a big fire, but no injuries or deaths reported. And that's Chemical Information News, another source. That's a big battery problem. How about this one? Popcorn may cause lung disease. When I first read this, I'm saying, well, who inhales popcorn? But as it turns out, it's the buttery flavoring, and you don't have to worry about it. Guess who has to worry about it? The people that work in the factory that put the popcorn in the bag. They're the ones that get too much of the buttery flavoring. I think.
There's someone that I heard about a couple years ago that would pop a bag of popcorn every day and open it freshly and smell the butter, the vapors. And he got cancer. And
really?
Just chewed the popcorn.
Okay, so the student, after saying that, was this in the news or just?
Yeah, it was in the news.
It was in the news. A guy who had a bag of popcorn every day, and he would open it and immediately inhale the buttery flavoring, and he got cancer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lung disease.
Well, lung disease. I'm sure that the lawyers are sorting out whether or not that was cause and effect.
Yeah.
But imagine what happens if you're in a factory and you're surrounded by this stuff all the time. That's the problem they were talking about. But I guess the moral is don't inhale your popcorn. West Virginia mine explosion traps 13. That was in January 3rd, 2006. That particular story has had a lot of fallout since then. I think the company involved eventually went bankrupt, and they were in the news again. That was a particularly nasty one. Here's interesting. Lorry driver. Okay, so where are we? The guy's driving a lorry. Where are we? Or in England, or UK somewhere. Using a mobile phone just before he caused an accident and killed a woman who was jailed for 4 years. So they have trouble with cell phones in the UK, looks like, as well as here. That was the BBC, August 7, 2006. Rules lag amid deadly dust blasts. We'll talk about this later. Just about anything, if you make it into a fine enough dust and suspend it in the air, is not only flammable but explosive. Even steel, if it's put in dust form, can ignite and burn. And the rules on this apparently are not as good as we would like them, because we still occasionally have things blow up because of dust in the air that gets ignited. And that's what this is about. You may have heard recently some politicians were saying that they're going to try to regulate dust on the farm. That's not the kind of dust we're talking about. This generally is a hazard if the dust is in an enclosed space, because otherwise it just goes thump, and somebody might get burned a little bit, but if it's enclosed, then you get a boom. Okay, so that's what that's about. What's going on here? Okay, so now I've been talking. Has anyone here got anything they've heard lately that they'd like to add to the news list? Hear anything on the radio, television, newspaper? Everyone knows what a newspaper is, right?
The cruise ship.
Oh, yes. Do you remember the name of that?
Costa Concordia.
What is it?
Costa Concordia.
Costa?
Concordia.
What happened there?
The captain ran it into a chartered rock. That's the best way to put it.
Well, you could say that.
He claimed it was uncharted.
Well, obviously he didn't know it was there. Okay. How many were on that ship? It's like 4,500 altogether, I think. 4,500. That's crew and passengers. Does anyone know what the confirmed death toll is?
Last I heard it was 12.
12?
They upped it to, I think, 15, so they got a couple more.
15?
Yeah.
So far,
They find more.
we still have some missing.
Yeah.
15 confirmed. And I heard something back there, I couldn't make it out.
We're just re-explaining it. I'm just telling them what happened.
Oh, okay. So that was probably operator error, right? But now that's an accident that affected everybody. But of course, the ship is not only for the passengers; the crew lives on it also. So it also was a danger to the crew as well as the ship, the passengers. And the funny thing about this is it didn't even sink. It just kind of heeled over in shallow water, and still 15 people died, you know. It's pretty bad to imagine what would happen if it settled in deeper water and actually went down. That could have been a lot worse. So we were kind of lucky, only 15 confirmed. That may go up, though, because I think there's about 30 people still missing. And they figure, you know, where would they go? Well, probably not. Okay, so that's a big one. Any others? International, national, local? Your cousin? What?
That nuclear plant in Japan.
Ah, okay. What was the name of that?
No idea.
I forget the name of it. But it was actually a complex. Nuclear. And that's due to the tsunami and earthquake. And there were a lot of people. I was keeping track for a while, but I think it's over 1,000 fatalities, well over 1,000. entire villages were simply wiped off the map by the tsunami. Because of the nuclear reactor, the area around there is uninhabitable, and a larger area, people can live there, but they can't sell or use any of the fish or the plants that they grow there. And it's mainly agricultural, so it's really a big problem still. Anyone know what happened? Want to tell us what happened? Well, basically, the facility was damaged by the earthquake, but the tsunami came in and washed away their emergency generation equipment. So now they had the plant that was damaged, but they had no power at all. The main power is gone, and their backup power is gone, and that's what caused the greatest problems. And in retrospect, people are thinking, that wasn't a good place to put it. But the tsunami was certainly the larger problem, but the nuclear complex, that caused a lot of problems that could have been avoided if they had picked a different place to put it, or at least a different place to put their backup generators. Anything small? These are all huge. Anything else? Okay, well. Yeah, I heard something this morning, but I can't remember the details, and it's probably time to go on. So we got that. Somebody just announced a recall, but I can't remember what it was for. Might not have been safety related. Okay. Let's see, what do I want to do here? Oh. There we go. Now, Bureau of Labor Statistics, there's a link. I think on the notes, on the computer version, if you click on this, you go to the website. If I click on this, nothing happens. Okay. In electronic form, I think that's actually a link. Injuries, let's see, IIF, Industrial Injuries and Fatalities. That's what IIF stands for. And then Pound Tables is a report that comes out every year on what has happened. This is compiled from multiple sources, and it's updated regularly, so we'll see in here that some of the data is preliminary because it just continually tries to collect more and more information. And they try to organize this to answer the kind of questions someone might ask in safety management. For example, how many Hispanic workers died on the job? Which occupations are the most risky? You might want to consider that when doing a career choice. Okay. How can I evaluate our safety record, our being the company you work for? How common is violence in the workplace? We always hear about it in the news, but how often does it actually happen? And what are the other companies' injury rates? Let's say someone's trying to charge us a premium on workers' comp because we have a certain injury rate, and we say, well, wait a minute. Our rate is much lower than the industry average. Why are we paying extra? See, that kind of thing. So you can get all that here. Here is a table. This is overall fatal work injuries, and this goes from 1992 all the way up to 2010, which is the latest date they can get data for. And you'll notice there's an asterisk there. And if you could read this down here, it'll say data for 2010 are preliminary. Data for prior years are revised and final. And actually, that footnote's on every one of the tables I'm going to show you. I'm not going to show you on the other tables. So this right here is preliminary data. The rest of this is considered final data. And so we look at this and we see the number of workplace fatal injuries, and here we're going 6,000, 6,000, 6,000, 5,000 and change, 5,000 and change. We're down to 4,500. So the workplace is safer? What do you think?
Not necessarily safer, but less likely to die on the job.
Yes, and why is it that people are less likely to die on the job in the last 2 years?
Maybe unemployment.
We have high unemployment. A lot fewer people died on the jobs, maybe because a lot fewer people are working. Is that possible? That's definitely possible. I mean, you look at this and you say, that's a nice significant drop. So let's look at this in a different way. This table is the fatal injury rate. And this is the rate of fatal work injuries per 100,000 full-time equivalent workers. So the way this works, like, if you have 2 part-time workers, that's the equivalent of 1 full-time worker. So you can look at this as 100,000 person hours of work. What does this do for us?
Accounts for that unemployment?
It accounts for unemployment. Because now we're looking at unemployment, we're looking at underemployment, we're looking at part-time employment. Now this is the injury rate per hours. And what do we see here? Well, if we go back here, this goes from 2006, right there, to the present. You see, look at that big drop. Would you say that's almost 6,000, 4,500? So we're looking like 20, 25% drop. And we look here, and what do we see?
It drops?
It dropped, but not as much. But the good news is it did drop. So in the answer to the question, is it safer now in the workplace? The answer is yeah. But not as safe as that first table will tell you. See, this is an election year. You're going to see a lot of this stuff of people showing the wrong table to make a point. And so you have to be careful. You have to stop and think now, what is this table actually telling me? This table is actually telling me that it's going down. But why is it going down? Well, that I still don't know. Like, for example, one reason is maybe industrial jobs are being shipped offshore, and we're seeing jobs now with lower risk. Maybe. I don't know. But I do know for sure that this gives me a better picture of what's happening to the safety in the workplace than that previous slide.
Maybe they're putting more money into safety and training in the job, and they're seeing a result of that too.
It could be that people are putting more money into it, but when the economy's tight, the historical precedent has been to skimp on safety. So what you're saying is, well, maybe people are saying, I can't afford to get any more employees. I better take care of the ones I got. Okay?
Or getting more injured employees.
Yeah. So let's look at some more figures. This is how fatalities occurred. You have the lovely pie chart, which always confuses people, because we never know whether it's the distance on the radius or the volume that matters. But we'll ignore that for now. What do we see here? What's our biggest problem?
Transportation.
Transportation. Look at that. However you cut it, that's about a third is in transportation. A little less than a quarter, 21%, is in highway incidents. But altogether, actually, it's more than a third, 39%. What is transportation? I mean, only 21%, only about half of them are on the highway. Highway would take care of truckers and cab drivers and stuff. Who are these others?
Workers, DOTs, things like that too.
Well, they're on the DOTs on the highway, right? Or maybe not,
They could be working on the highway.
right? What other transportation do we have besides highway?
Railroads.
We got railroads, we got transport, ocean transport, we got river traffic. Okay, so that's that right there, and we see right there we got quite a big problem. What's our second biggest problem from transportation?
Assault. Violent acts.
Let's see, assaults and violent acts. 18%. Wow. So if you don't get hit on the highway, the trouble can come in and hit you. What do we got next? Let's see. I like this. Contact with objects and equipment. That's you got to get used to this language. They got hit by something. Okay, contact doesn't injure anybody. You got to get hit or pushed, right? And then we got falls. Fall to a lower level is 11%. What are the 3%?
Just a fall on the ground.
Just tripping and falling on the ground. Okay? It does sound funny because it's 3% or to a higher level? They're falling up escalators, right? Okay. And then exposure to harmful substances or environments. What percent is that? Oh, 9%. Harmful substances. Popcorn, right? Harmful substances, not popcorn, but the other stuff. And then fires and explosions, 4%. Those always make the news. Whenever anything blows up or burns down, it's in the newspaper. Some of this other stuff, though, you notice the highway incidents, 39%. I used to live in a part of Las Cruces where it was an exit ramp from 25, and about every day or so an accident would occur there, but only about once a week would it make the newspaper. These accidents here don't get as much press as those and these, okay? So we can see how things go. Now, this is overall industry. Here's the 4 most frequent work-related fatal injury events between 1992 and 2010, and again the asterisk. So let's see, what's the top one here? Here's the highway. We see this one up, and look, the last few years it's gone down, possibly because maybe we're putting less stuff on the highway because the economy is a little soft. Considering now that this is the most frequent work-related injury, what would happen if this goes down to the overall rate?
Less deaths.
It's going to go down too. So we might be seeing here that 0.5% drop, or, excuse me, 1/2, what was that? That was slide, that was the rate. The 1/2 per 100,000 employees might simply be right there. Okay? How about this one? Green, on this one here, is homicides. We notice that even though homicides is a big one, what's happened over the last 20 years?
It's gone down.
It's gone down considerably. Wow. It must have really been a problem over here. Then we got falls, presumably to a higher or a lower level. They peaked over here and then it's gone down. This might again be due to the economy. Okay. Struck by object, and we can see that it's going down a little bit. Again, this dip might be for the same reason, but it hasn't changed as much as these top two here, the blue and the red. Any question on this? Okay. Now, so far we've looked at all industries, but people work in specific industries. So let's look at the different sectors. Now, this table shows us 2 things. Over here is the number of injuries, and over here is the fatal work injury rate per 100,000. The actual number, the rate. Now, which of these are more important, the rate or the actual number?
Rate.
Why is the rate more important?
Takes out people, more of a just statistic. Accounts for unemployment.
Okay, the rate is important because we can identify which of these sectors are more dangerous, right? But what about the number? What does that tell us? that tells us how many people are actually injured. So, for example, here, the rate is 9.5 per 100,000. Remember that previous chart, the average was 3.5. So this is about 3 times as dangerous as the average. You got 751 injuries here. So even though the rate here is only moderately high, because so many people are working in construction, the impact of a lack of safety in this industry leads to a lot of injuries. So the answer to my previous question is both. Because over here we can see how many people are, let's see, number of people that are killed in accidents last year. If I'm running for political office, that's 751 voters that were lost, okay? That's very important because what the government does affects everybody. On the other hand, if I'm in an industry, I will be interested in this rate because that affects the scope of what I'm working on. So we see here, agricultural, forestry, fishing, and hunting. I like this one here because most people think of forestry as a walk in the park. And as we can see, it's really quite a dangerous occupation. It has the highest rate per 100,000. It doesn't have the highest number because not that many people work in it. And then we come down here. Here's the second highest rate, which is mining. And we see that 172 people were killed in mining in 2010 because why is the rate high and the number low? Not a lot of people work in mining. Okay? So as we look at this, both sides can be important depending on what we're trying to do. And basically, if you see a high rate here and a low number there, that means not a lot of people work in that sector. If you see a low rate, like here, 2.2, which is below the 3.5 average, and that's the 4th highest number, and that's working in the government, whatever that means. I'm not quite sure. Okay, so this is a breakdown according to number and rate for 2010 across these industries. And any questions? Okay. Here's mining. Mining, we talked about OSHA earlier. Mining is regulated by MNSHA, which is a different organization than OSHA, although it has a similar structure in some ways. And that's come under scrutiny lately because there's been some pretty bad accidents in the last few years. And people are asking what the heck is going on. So this is a chart now since 2003 to 2010. The dark blue on the, oh, that's interesting. On the screen it looks green. Well, the bottom bar is oil and gas extraction, and the upper bar is all other mining, which would be like gold, copper, coal. They don't differentiate between open pit and shaft mining. That's all there. And we can see now there's been a remarkable increase in extraction industries in 2010 in spite of the fact that what caused transportation to go down? The economy is soft. So this is one sector which would be of concern now. This would be an area of concern because in spite of the fact that the economy has gone down and there's probably less activity in these sectors, the number of fatalities have gone up quite a bit. Someone else could say, well, actually, this year here was abnormal because now if you look at this and you look at that, they're about the same, which would mean this would imply that our extraction industries are starting on a way to recovery. Maybe. Okay? But anyways, that's our situation there. Now we go by group. I missed my... this is similar to the previous one. We're kind of relating things in different ways. So we got transportation and material moving, and again we see that that's a huge sector. So we have over 1,000 people died, and the rate is 14.2, which is pretty high. Construction and extraction is high. Service, sales and related, we see that the rates now are below the 3.5, but still, because so many people work in sales and professions, a lot of people died. So even though the rate is low, you could say, well, wouldn't that environment be safer generally? And then we get into farming, fishing, and forestry, which when we group it this way, we see that this is really not as idyllic as people would have us believe, because the rate is very high, and again, the number that died is low because small numbers. Production, 2.8. That's up near service, management, business, and financial operations, and that used to be a huge sector. It's not so big in the U.S. anymore. We still see 222 people died, though, even though the rate is there. And office and administrative support. So if you want to go into a safe job, it looks like something in office and administrative support, but apparently not for forestry. Okay? These categories overlap, so I'm not quite sure how things fit. Now we get into the high-rate occupation, fishers and related fishing worker. Now, I'm not talking about the guy who takes a rod out on the weekend and goes in the lake. Have you seen is it Deadly Catch? How many people have seen that show? That's the kind of fishing that contributes to this. Very dangerous operation. You have to have a high level of skill just to survive, leave alone make a living at it. And we see that the rate there is 116 per 1,000 workers, but only 29 people died because not a lot of people are willing to do that. Logging is also very high, 91.9. Remember, the average is 3.5. Aircraft pilots and flight engineers, 70.6. Now, why do you think that's so high? Why aren't we hearing about this? A lot of the planes that go down are local operations. And, you know, a pilot is a pilot, whether they're in an airplane with 300 passengers or in an airplane with 5 passengers. But the one in the plane with 5 passengers is less likely to get reported nationally than the one with 300. So flying is still pretty dangerous. Not as dangerous as fishing, but dangerous. Farmers and ranchers are down now to 40. Mining machine operators around 40. Roofers. Anyone here ever do any roofing? Okay, that's pretty dangerous. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Refuse and recyclable material collectors. Wow, that's kind of surprising. Drivers, sales workers, and truck drivers. Now the rate is low, but the number is high because we got lots of people doing this. Industrial machinery, 20.3. Police and sheriff's patrol officers, 18. Now, you would expect police to be somewhere on this list, but not on the bottom of it. So it's a dangerous occupation, but there are others that are more dangerous. Okay. So these are the I think the top 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, the top 10. And certainly if you're in any of these industries, you want to pay a lot of attention to safety. Because remember now, these numbers are averages, which means some operations are much higher and some operations manage to be lower. Okay. So when we're doing this, okay, I'm recording this January 23rd, 2012. If you're viewing this lecture a year from now, all of that stuff we just went over is old hat. Okay, and one of the things I want to encourage you this semester is to learn where these websites are. It's really nice. All this stuff is on the web now. It used to be that you had to go to the library and look up different manuals and go here and go there. Now it's all accessible, which is good because this stuff changes. Things that are true one year, people pay attention to it, it changes. The next year, we got another problem. So here are some data sources. Department of Labor, www.dol.gov, Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS.gov, and then this one that I had, the Industry, Injury, and Fatality Report. And then this is OSHA information. Here's another one. This is actually the report that I used for the previous slides, this one right here. That number changes, though. And then Occupational Safety and Health Administration, they have a website with a whole bunch of stuff. And we'll be going to that website in a later lecture so you can see the kinds of things that are available. But all of this stuff now, if you want to research it and find out what's happening sometime in the future, this is where you want to go. Okay. And there are other places. Oops. Sorry about that. It is clickable. Okay, I've been talking a lot. Any questions? Comments? Please? Observations? Anybody awake? Okay, that's good. Okay. Let's, yes?
So I have a question. I didn't really see anything where, like, you talk about police and you talk about maybe fire, but what about like rescue workers? Like when you have a natural disaster, there could be a lot of injuries because there's a lot of unsafe conditions that are developed.
Well, the question is, what about rescue workers? I'm just relating what is in the report there. If you go to those sites, there's a lot more information that wasn't in the report. I suspect that rescue workers are a little lower than police, and that's the reason why it's not on that top 10 list. But the other problem is a lot of rescue workers are volunteers. So I don't even know if that data shows up in these databases. It would be an interesting thing to go out and Google. We can still Google now, right? They didn't shut that down? Okay, we can Google and find out, because somebody certainly is figuring this out.
Well, and volunteer fire and that kind of volunteer.
Yeah, volunteer firemen's another one. I'm not sure if the volunteer firemen are included in these, because technically they're not employees. Okay? And as you burrow down into a specific application, that's why you need to go out and check stuff, because we're right now looking at the big picture. Okay? Maybe we should check that out before we get to the fire. Some general principles. We talk about competing costs, management clarity, consumers versus workers, the weakest link, uncertainty and risk, and technological progress. Now, we're going to talk about all of these in considerable detail later, but let me just give you the big picture. Basically, the problem we have, the reason why we have trouble with safety, is that generally to be safe you have to spend more money. Okay? So we have competing costs. Now, in order to be safer, we have to spend money, let's say, or have employees spend more time, and since we're paying for time, that costs money. That cost is definite and visible. You know what it is because you're paying it. On the other side, we have costs that are indefinite and less visible. For example, if you drive around without headlights at night, you might not have an accident the first time you do it. Does that mean it's safe? Probably not. And one of the things that governs our behavior is that accidents, fortunately, are rare events. But because we're rare events, people tend to minimize the consequences of that kind of behavior. So that cost doesn't always happen. You don't always have an accident. Someone doesn't always get hurt. So it's less definite. And also you have other costs which are less visible. For example, morale. When somebody who's liked in a factory gets injured, that tends to affect all the workers. And to put it crudely, they become less efficient and less effective. They put it another way, how do you put a dollar cost on that, and who pays it? You see? So this side of the balance is much harder to determine than this side. So what happens is we tend to weight these more than they should be in this particular trade-off. Now, what regulation does is it sticks in fines and penalties. So if you go around driving at night without lights on, what's liable to happen? Yeah, a cop's going to pull you over and you're going to get a ticket. The guy's, well, you nuts. Okay? And because a lot of people won't drive around at night with their lights off, not because it's a dumb thing to do, but because they don't want to get a ticket. So with fines and penalties, which are more definite and more obvious, we can push this down a little bit and get things a little bit safer. Okay? Any question on that? All right. Now, consumer protection. We're talking about workplace safety. That's a workplace. What does that have to do with what goes on in the home? Or maybe a store? Well, the truth of the matter is, a lot of the things that are used in factories are also used in stores and in the home. For example, cups, saucers, plates, that kind of thing, electric drills, hammers. Many of the products that people use here have similar products over here. So if someone gets injured with a faulty hammer here, that result can impact the use of a similar hammer in industry. Conversely, if something that you use in industry needs to be upgraded, manufacturers don't necessarily want to make two versions of everything, so you may get the benefit of that higher safety level here. And of course, a lot of the stuff you use here is made here. So the other thing we have going on in here is not only safety for the employees, but safety for the customers, because if you end up injuring or killing your customers, pretty soon you don't have any customers. And then, of course, the thing in here in the middle part, the little stores, retail trade, this is an area which is somewhat like the home and somewhat like industry. People use machines here. They use chemicals here. They have environments that could be dangerous. Until the last 20 years, people really haven't paid much attention to this environment. But now we're paying more attention because where our economy is going, a lot more people are working in this kind of environment than in this kind. So as it turns out, all of these guys are interrelated. So we'll see some cases where changes in consumer product safety eventually led to changes in industrial safety and vice versa. The safety chain. Now, in most of what you've done in engineering, you've had an objective. How strong does the floor have to be? Which way do I point the arrow? How fast does Superman have to fly? You know, those kinds of things. We usually have a pretty definite objective. Safety is not like that. In safety, we have an environment. And anytime you make a change in the environment, you may change everything in the environment, or anything. So, it's like a chain. And the idea is you don't want the chain to break. Because if it does, then you have an accident. That's the analogy. And as you've heard in the saying, this chain's only going to be as strong as its weakest link. The problem we have is we don't know which link is the weakest. In fact, we might not even know which are the links. So this is something you don't have to do in other engineering problem solving, but you have to do here. You have to identify the links, and you have to look at how strong they are and try to see which one is the weakest, because that's going to determine where your system fails. Now, of course, the easiest way to find the weakest link is just wait until it breaks. And, you know, obviously, oh, that must have been the weakest one, because that's the one that broke. Actually, that is much of how safety rules and regulation get born. The link breaks, and someone says, oh, we have to do something about this. And as a result, when you look at the regulation, you'll see that it lacks sometimes a clear and concise underlying set of strategies or principles, because each one of these things tends to arise, or many of these things tend to arise as a result of one specific thing that happened maybe 100 years ago or 30 years ago. Now, what we want to do nowadays, the idea with OSHA, is we want to try to prevent this from happening, but try to figure out what links are weak and then address them before they break. What was the weak link in that cruise ship?
The captain.
The captain, see. Obviously, they didn't, you know, he came close to shore in that area, I think it was in 2007. That would have been a nice thing for them to notice and talk to him about then. Nothing happened, right? So he figured, well, I did it before, nothing happened, so I can do it again. And we see what happens. He was the weakest link. But the system wasn't set up to identify him. And consequently, not only wasn't he identified, he wasn't even counseled on this behavior because the ship didn't sink. Okay. Any questions? All right. Uncertainty is the cause of many accidents. If the bad thing always happens, you're not going to do it because you know it always happens, right? Any of you guys do anything dumb when you were little kids? Like jump off the roof with a bed sheet as a parachute, or stick a fork into the outlet, you know? Those touch a hot stove. Those things tend to have immediate results. Chances are no one's done that twice, okay? The thing is, we get into the bad habit of doing things because we don't have an accident every time. So this uncertainty is the cause. It's common in construction. In construction, almost everything that's being done is being done for the first time. It's construction. Every project is unique. Everything is different. So there's a lot of uncertainty in construction. Anything new, a new kind of car, a new building a city in a new kind of area, new kind of medicine, everything new introduces uncertainty. And then, in general, technological change causes a problem. Any technological change lately that's causing difficulty? Anyone know what this is? Cell phone, right? Cell phones cause any problem lately? Automobile accidents because people are texting while driving, which turns out to be extremely dangerous. Now, what's on the good side? Well, after you have the accident, you can call 911. You don't have to go looking for a phone. So the phone has some good stuff about it. Nobody foresaw that people would text while driving. But apparently that's become a problem. Okay, so technological change. Good stuff, bad stuff. It's the way it happens. Generally, as things progress, what happens is we have a rapid increase in stuff. New stuff gets invented. The risk and danger goes up. And then after a while, that kind of slows down, so people go back now and say, well, what can we do with this to make it safer? You know, a lot of outlets originally had the prongs sticking out instead of a socket to go in. They figured that one out pretty quick. So then it gets better, and then somebody gets a bunch of new ideas, and life gets risky again, and then somebody goes back and fixes those ideas, and it gets safer. And this is the constant cycle that we've seen forever and probably will never end unless people stop inventing stuff, which I just can't see happening. Here's one. My wife's from the Chicago area. In case you're unaware of this, Chicago is where the first automobiles popped up, at least in the U.S. In 1888, they had a lot of wagon accidents. This is fatalities in Chicago. In 1908, the population increased. They had a lot more, and they had a few automotive accidents. In 1916, they had still a little more wagon, but a lot more automotive accidents. And then in 1930, there is a wagon down there, but it's teeny-weeny. And we see there's a huge number of auto accidents. What's going on here?
No traffic control.
Yes, in addition, very little control, and?
Abundance of cars.
What's that?
More cars.
More cars! A lot more cars. And so what happens here? Do you think they stopped having more cars?
Better regulation.
Now we started having regulation, traffic rules, licenses for people who drive, that kind of stuff. So actually what happened here is a lot more people are driving in 1990 than were in 1940, but the place is a lot safer because of things like traffic lights and traffic signs and stuff like that. So you see that, right? It goes up and then it goes down. Horses and cars. In 1916, 1,215 horses were strayed or stolen. 3,295 were lost or stolen. Cars don't usually stray. In 1916, 1,189 horses recovered, 98%. Most of them just went home. Horses do that. About 71% of the autos were recovered. Autos don't go home, okay? Let's see. And here now is the other chart for this. Thousands of vehicles in Chicago. 1908, very few cars. Almost everybody that had a vehicle had a wagon. And then in 1916, roughly 50-50. 1930, there's still wagons down there, but not a lot. And we see this is going up. Now, if we compare that to the earlier slide, slide 30, we see there really was a big improvement in safety. What else do we notice? Well, a lot more people now have their own transportation because wagons are very expensive to maintain. So we've seen a great improvement in the number of people who have vehicles. In the earlier slide, there was a drop. Now here we go. This is like that 1 per 100,000 employee hours, years. 10,000 vehicles, and here we can now see what happens is it turns out the wagons weren't as safe as they looked, and the cars have become increasingly safer as time goes on. I think it was around here where seat belts were introduced. But I don't believe they were mandatory until about 1970 or 1980, somewhere in there. Okay? And then here, this is the fatalities per 100,000 people. Now, this is people, not necessarily people driving cars. People. So we see in 1908, it was pretty safe. Things went up 1930. I wonder how much of that was related to the mobs. And then things dropped and settled down roughly to somewhere between 10 and 15 per 100,000 in 1990. Again, goes up, and then it comes down. So if we're thinking of inventing something new, you got to put up with this. What's the lessons? Technological change can make us safer or make us less safe, or actually both. Can safe in one way and unsafe in another. Statistics can improve our understanding or conceal the key facts. Again, if you pick the wrong chart, you may come to the wrong conclusion. And as I mentioned, this is an election year, so you're going to see a lot of that. All right. Now, engineers, believe it or not, are humans. We want to adopt technology. That usually means we end up doing something that hasn't been done before, which is called extrapolation. It's beneficial, but it's also dangerous. Anytime you go outside the lines, there's a great potential to improve things and a great potential to really mess things up. So the desire to promote good is coupled with the danger of introducing something bad. Here's something that's a little dated, but not too much. Anyone remember this, the I-35 bridge collapse? Okay, this was, oh, I don't have a date here, do I? No, I didn't put a date on it. I'll have to, well, there's the link to it. It's August 2nd of some year. Anyways, this is a bridge on I-35. It just collapsed. Fortunately, it wasn't really busy when it collapsed, but still 13 people died and 145 were injured. This right here used to come over. We're going to talk about this later, and you'll see the before and after. But part of the problem here is this bridge used a new kind of construction, and people weren't entirely sure how to react to the data they were getting from the bridge, which told them about what was going on the bridge. And actually, it was an effort to make the bridge safer that led it to collapsing. U.S. Airways 1549. How many people remember this? Guy landed a liner in Hudson, I believe it was. Yeah, Hudson River. Okay. No fatalities, no serious injuries, but 155 sets of luggage were lost. I think they eventually got them back, but they were kind of damp. Okay. So here's another one. Any thoughts on engineers and safety at this point? Can we infect safety? Here's a visual aid. Engineers' involvement. Of course, we design stuff. So an engineer can introduce a design flaw that can cause things to fail. If we make things too difficult to manufacture, then people do things during the manufacturing step which can introduce a failure. And we'll see this with the Kansas City Bridge. Operator error. If we make things too difficult to operate, it's easy for someone to do something wrong. Actually, that's not so big a problem. The captain was the operator on that cruise ship, but I don't think this was the issue. We could have an adverse environment. That's what happened with the power plant in Japan. That was the biggest earthquake they ever recorded. Poor maintenance. Nepal, India, they had a chemical factory there. had a big problem, caused a lot of people to die. The basic thing was they were scavenging parts from the facility to keep another facility running. I would call that poor maintenance. Malfunction and failure, anything can fail. Anyone who hasn't had anything fail? No, okay. Other, whatever that is. Poor management. But you'll notice on all of these, the engineer has part of the footprint. So in fact, we have an opportunity to affect every aspect of the safety of something. So we asked some questions like, what stresses are possible? What risks are present? How might it fail? Will it be made correctly? How might the operator act? Will the maintenance be in fact done? And will somebody override a feature? And this is why it's so expensive to design stuff. We can introduce problems, and we'll talk about all of these as we go through the semester. For example, placing controls in an awkward position. Exposed hazards, that almost never happens anymore. We're real sensitive to that. High concentration, someone's working on something very intently, and they're not noticing that they're running their thumb into the saw blade. I know a guy who did that with a handsaw. Allows hazardous operation. For example, years ago you could start a car when it was in gear. Not anymore. Restriction of movement. Ever see what a firefighter wears? That's restricting. High skill surgical instruments. It's a very specialized area of design. Is design instruments so a surgeon can do what a surgeon has to do reliably. Scope. First of all, hopefully everybody here is going to be concerned for their own safety, right? Yes. Now, workplace safety, when you're going in working somewhere, it'd be in a factory or a retail establishment or an office building, hopefully after this course you'll notice things that need to be addressed. Whether or not you can address them is another issue. Safety and design. Now, if you're working as a design engineer, we're going to look at tools. We're going to look at the workplace itself and processes and procedures. So depending on what role you might play with those things, we'll address that. Management, some of you may end up in management one day, but by management here, we simply mean the way things are done, not the guys in the suits. And then some of you may end up being safety engineers, in which case you're going to have a very high level of awareness and concern. Now, we're running a little long, so later you might form a list of yourself of what you consider to be your high priority safety items. Okay, the topics, we're going to talk about causes of accidents, consequences of accidents, theories of prevention, specific common hazards. The middle of the course is going to be dedicated to that. Human beings, which somehow mess things up all the time, or a lot of times, and we're going to end up with managing safety. Part one is the general background. We're going to talk about histories, theories, law, regulation, yada, yada, yada. Part two is specific hazards. We're going to look at the most dangerous, common, controllable type of environments. Part three, human and elements of management. We're going to look at human factors and ways to measure and manage safety for people who end up in that position. We're going to ask, how do accidents happen? Usually there's three things: unsafe acts, unsafe conditions, unsafe acts, running around with your car without lights on at night, unsafe condition, having no brakes, okay, chance. Hey, anybody can be unlucky, right? What can we do to prevent them? We look at environments, devices, human beings, because, you know, machines don't really get injured. Only people do. And management at all levels. Technical knowledge. What's this? Yeah, it's an outlet. We got one over there. What's that? That's the safety ground. What's that? That's called the return. And what's that? That's the one you don't want to stick the paperclip into. That's the hot side, right? Technical knowledge. We just have to know these things. Levels of safety. At 411, we're going to talk about procedures, hazards, power, risk, and protecting yourselves. For management in ie561, we're going to look at workplace design, policy, measurement, and training. Now, actually, we're going to look at everything in both courses, but in management in 561, we're going to emphasize these topics more, and in 411, I'll be emphasizing these topics more in assignments and tests. Okay, quickly, knowledge, awareness, and skill. We've got to know laws. We're bound by law as professionals. Hazards, tools, mainly an industrial focus, although we'll go into some services because there's a lot of that now. We want to prevent accidents. That's our main focus. We want to limit consequences if we can't prevent accidents. And we'll be concerned with environments, people, and machines. Now, let's see. Nuts and bolts. There's a course site. It's the same site for 411 and for 561. Most of the material applies to both courses. If something applies to just one, I will say for 411 only or for 561 only. You'll find copies of the lecture notes. If you come to class, I'll give you a copy. Freebie. Okay. The ones up on the website are just like this, except they're in color. Okay. You may want to download a copy electronically to have for later, in case you run out of room. Assignments will be up there on the course site. There's something called self-check problems, which you can go through and try out different things and check yourself to see if you got it right. There's, of course, regular problems, these have problem statement, a set of hints, and detailed answers. That should have been indented. Also, there's the Engineering DE site, which has compressed videos. Now, for those of you who've watched, in case you forget something or there's a gap in your notes, you can go to the compressed video and run me forward at 4 times normal speed and find what you're looking for. And we're also going to do some things on Adobe Connect, which is going to give the people who are not here a chance to interact with the other students. Let's see. That looks like the same as the other side. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Now, this slide rather, this has links to everything I talked about in the lecture. So if you want to go back and get more details or more information, you can just go to this. One reason to download the notes is this will be a live link in the notes. And I generally will do this on each lecture, provide you with a page of links, because everything changes and there's always more. Now, next time, lecture 2, we're going to talk about safety fundamentals, and you can read about these in chapter 3 of the text. Okay? Any questions? I guess we're done.